Hey, what's good? This is Brother Mose, Underground Footy Podcast. Just letting you know if you want to support what we're doing here, you can just hit us up on pgyoungboys.com. Anyway, let's get down to the show.
Some come
All right.
sideways, some come straight way.
We up with a special edition of the Underground Footy Podcast. I got special guests. These are my homies. These are the guys that helped me to get through this youth soccer landscape. And we're gonna talk about some of our thoughts and the pathways. Now, let me just tell you, there's four of us on here. I got three boys. My man Kelvin got three boys. My man Mike, he got two boys. And my man Gus got two boys. So between all of us, we got 10 ballers, 10 young ballers doing their thing at different levels, different places, different pathways. So we're just gonna kind of kick it. So again, this is the Footy Brothers special edition of the Underground Footy Podcast. And you guys ready to step on the subway?
Let's go. Let's go.
All right. So I'm gonna start out. I want introductions. I'll start with you, Kelvin. Let us know a little about yourself and your young men, and ages, things like that. And let's see what we can so people have a foundation for what we're talking about.
Thanks for having me. First of all, glad to be here. Finally on the Footy Podcast. So, Kelvin Davis, my name. I'm the parent of three boys, as Mo said. I've been involved in the soccer thing now, I guess, with them. I didn't play myself at all, so it was kind of new to me. My kids gravitated towards it. They loved it when they were younger. Started playing. Three boys, Kelvin Jr., we call him KJ, affectionately. He's played all the way from U8 at all levels. You know, we started out in Jersey. I grew up in New York. We moved to Jersey. My wife's from Jersey. Went to a Red Bulls game as part of a scout troop, Cub Scout event, and he was playing with them during a little halftime thing. They're like, "Hey, he needs to be playing soccer." And I was like, "Yeah, we ain't doing that. We're playing baseball. I play baseball. He gonna play baseball." From that standpoint, I had to take a step back and it's not about me. So I put him in Boys and Girls Club. Went from there, progressed from there, went to club, and he's played club. Then he played academy, played in college, played at Frostburg State University. Played some pro, Baltimore Kings. Now he's coaching Maryland United. He's 24 years old. Middle son Kyle Davis. He's currently at Mount St. Mary's University in Maryland, and he is just turned 20 last week.
Wow.
April Fool.
Wow.
He same thing. We kind of started a little bit different since we already kind of thought we knew what we were doing because KJ was already playing club, so we went directly to the club route with Kyle. So he's a little bit more advanced. Played club, then played academy. Kind of like where we've met, Most and Mike and Gus, all our sons played at DC United Academy, so that's where Kyle played. And he's played on that level. Now he's in college at Mount St. Mary's. Youngest son, he's like I say, 20. My youngest son, Kareem, he's 16. Same thing. Started the club route. Went to the pre-academy. Got injured. We all had injuries along the ways and stuff like that. We can get to that later. But now he's kind of searching for a club at this particular moment.
But he's enjoying himself because he's still playing.
He'll probably play somewhere this spring. We'll
Yeah.
in there for some minutes and stuff like that. But
Now you currently live in the Bowie area, right?
I
The
live in Bowie.
DMV.
Yep.
For people who don't know, that's DC, Maryland, Virginia. We all based. The footprint is kind of like out of the between Bowie, Mo County. Well, basically PG County and Montgomery County between all of us right now. All right. Okay, Mike, give us a rundown.
Sure. My name is Michael Gaines. I have two sons. My oldest son is Michael II. My youngest, he also is affectionately known as Leto. My youngest is Ramesses. Ramesses Gaines. We call him Rami. Oldest son is 19. He is a sophomore at Penn State. He plays on the Penn State men's soccer team. He is currently injured, so he's out this season with recovering from an Achilles tear. And my youngest is 17. He's a senior in high school, but he plays for Bethesda's U19 Academy team. So he's a 2003. So as far as our journey, we started in Waldorf. Currently live in Oxon Hill right now, but started in Waldorf, Maryland, with my youngest son playing. He played with Waldorf Soccer Club, of course, like most people start out playing rec soccer. And he had a knack for it. He was talented. He wasn't the fastest, he wasn't always, but he was, he had a talent for the game. And he wasn't the biggest and strongest kid, but he actually, with his skills, he was good with it. So as a 7-year-old, he ended up starting playing travel soccer with a U9 team, the Waldorf Ice at the time. And that was the entree to travel soccer. So, of course, when you do that, you go from, it's fun to go and watch the game and have some oranges and walk the sidelines on a Saturday. And then I'm going to go on and get on with the rest of my day to why am I in, Crofton, Maryland at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, or Saturday when I could be asleep, So he went to the travel route first, starting when he was 7. Then a couple years later, while he was going towards moving from rec into travel, his younger brother, Ramesses, was starting when he was 4. And, of course, these rec clubs, they do because at the time I was younger, I was still playing little sports on my own on the weekends, flag football league over in Gravelly Point, over 30 basketball at Andrews Air Force Base, stuff like that. And they said, well, if you want your son to play, he's too young. So if you coach, then we'll let him play. Rec clubs have probably done that to y'all at some point. So the hook, and of course he really wanted to play. So we did that and got him started when he was 4. And he did the rec thing for a couple years and went through Rec Plus program, which while I was at Waldorf, I was on the executive board of Waldorf Soccer Club. And I actually was one of the people that helped start their Rec Plus program at Waldorf. And so Rami went through that. So eventually they both ended up in travel soccer at what was at the time called Free State. Leto went and he was playing with Kelvin's son, Kyle, on the team there as a U11. Rami came around that same time, I believe, as a U9 player. And actually he did some U8 stuff and actually played a little bit with Kareem one year. And so that's actually where we met, Kelvin, was at that U8 game when,
right.
Because Rami.
4x4, 4v4, right?
It was 4v4, that's right.
Right.
So my kids went from one travel from Waldorf to Bowie to go play for Free State. Eventually my older son got there was another program where they were looking for kids. It was an opportunity to get into DC United. We did that for 12 weeks. Kelvin, you did that as well with Kyle because they were both on the same team as U12s. We're, again, looking for more, trying to open the aperture a little wider to beyond just the colloquial kind of thinking of some of the clubs at the travel level and look for an opportunity. So both of them got into DC United Academy and ended up being teammates as U13 pre-academy players and went on through the system all the way through until they both went on to college. So my older son, Leto, he was there from U13 all the way through U19 and then went on to play at Penn State. And like I said, this is his second year and he's going through an injury, recovering from an injury right now, but looking to be back My oldest son is a right back. Both of my boys are defenders. My oldest son is a right back. So that was his journey. My younger son's journey was a little more torturous. He's a center back. And, you know, very different players. One is more cerebral, one is more direct action type of cat, but still both very talented. But his journey was a little more complicated because when he followed his brother to DC United as a U11 with the pre-academy at the time, I guess it was U12 at the time, pre-academy, he did okay, but he wasn't, you know, one of the standouts. And at the time, they decided to release him in the middle of the year, which kind of led him to a little bit of a spiral, having to go. You know, he went to some other clubs in Virginia, took him over to Virginia to a couple clubs, Leon Vernon, and then Barca, and then through a summer program actually with UMost that you ran with Philip Jow up at Howard University with the PG Young Boys and Philip Jow. It was an opportunity for Rami came to that, and Philip Giles saw him and said, why aren't you playing in the academy? And he was like, well, you know, this gave him his story, of course. Philip Giles said, hey, I got you. And he went to Bethesda. So went to Bethesda Academy, some back and forth there. He went back to DC at one point due to some changes up there at Bethesda. Then he came back to Bethesda because of some changes at DC United, them not having a U19. He endured some injuries along the way and overcame them. And now he's a U19 player at Bethesda's academy. He's, you know, on his college search right now. He's gotten into several schools, haven't gotten all the bites from the coaches. Part of that is affected by COVID. While he was at DC U17, that's when the USDA US Soccer Development Academy shut down its academy. So that kind of wiped out recruiting for his, you know, the second half of his junior year. Coming into the fall, he came back to Bethesda in the fall of 2020, and he got injured. So he messed up his knee, which took him out for the season, which also took time away from recruiting. So now in the spring, he's pretty healthy. He's playing, you know, time has passed, but he's having some discussions with a couple coaches, but he's definitely he's going to go to college. He's definitely, you know, he's gotten into several colleges right now. Just don't have the commitment from the coaches yet with regard to soccer. He is talking to Philip Jow about Howard, so we'll see where all that goes. That's his journey. So he, you know, we'll see where he ends up next year, and hopefully, you know, at some point he'll be able to go and study what he wants to study, which is film, and play, and also live his dream of playing soccer. And maybe he'll even play against his brother at some point. So
Howard's a good place to film that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Gus, what you got for us, man?
Man, I don't even know how to come after those two brothers. You should let me go first. Full name is Augustus, but everybody affectionately calls me Gus. I have two boys, AJ, who's he'll be 19. Wow. AJ will be 19 at the end of this month. And my youngest son, Andrew, he'll be 14 at the end of this month. So AJ's April 24th and Andrew's April 27th. I grew up in New York City. When I grew up, mid-70s, well, I was born early 70s, but mid-70s, 80s, it was all about basketball. You know, I played a little bit of soccer like around my junior high years, but nothing serious. Ended up moving out to Maryland. That's where I met my wife for now 20 years. And, you know, she didn't know anything about sports. She wasn't into sports, but we live in Silver Spring, Maryland, and it's a very diverse community. So from the time AJ was in preschool, that's all they played. They played soccer. So he took to it right away, and he really loved it. And, you know, I wasn't into it at first, so I tried to get him to football, basketball, baseball, all the other sports, but he just kept gravitating back to soccer. And so, you know, with AJ, one of his main attributes is speed. So people just kept saying, look, throw him up top, let him run past everybody. So we did that all through like the Tacoma Park Rec League. We ended up going to Olney Rangers, OBGC, because a friend of mine knew Gideon and some of the people who were also from Olney Rangers at the time. And they were like, yeah, there's a good club. There's a guy there named Pete Wood. He's from England. And so we went over there. And I remember AJ went for a tryout there, and they were like, well, hey, there's a tournament at Covenant Park. Can you come to Covenant Park in the tournament? And we said, sure, we'll come to the tournament. So we went to the tournament. We got there late. I had never been to Covenant Park. I didn't know where that was. And so it was already, I guess, halftime by the time we got there. AJ comes into the game, and immediately he scores like 2 goals. Just blows past everybody. And I'm like, okay, maybe this kid does have something. Now, again, I'm new, not understanding, okay, he's got some speed, but can he really play? So we stayed at Olney for a while. And then a friend at Olney said, hey, you know, there's this coach that coaches at SAC, and they have a pre-academy. They're having a friendly. You want to go play with them? So I said, okay. You know, we were always looking for places to play. So took AJ over there. The coach's name is Oscar. Oscar is an academy coach for Baltimore Armor. And I remember after the scrimmage that we played in, he said, look, I'll take AJ and put him on the team right now. He said, you need to leave Olney, come over here. And I was like, well, you know, that's why I got loyalty over royalty. I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to stay out the year, and we'll see about next year. Well, next year we ended up going to Baltimore Armor. Well, at that time, it was still SAC Academy before they became Baltimore Armor. But that was the first year of Baltimore Armor, and he was U13. Yeah, U13. And so did really well. During that same time, he had went to like ODP. Then he got selected for Region 1. Then he got selected for like the top 17 in the region. But that summer, they were taking a trip to Arizona to play. And at the same time, Armor was playing in a tournament in Disney. So Oscar said, look, ODP is done. You don't need to mess with ODP anymore. Come on over here. Let's go to Disney. Right. So AJ ended up not going on that trip, but just a couple of kids that, you know, people may know, like Griffin Yao was on that Region 1 team. Joseph Scally, who's now at Borussia Mönchengladbach, who's at New York City FC, he was on that team. So, you know, years later, I always wondered, well, what if AJ would have went to that trip? You know, what would have been the experience? But still was happy that he went to Armor, did some good things, and we ended up playing DC United. And we knew a couple of people on DC United, and they said, hey, you know, they kind of like AJ, you should bring him over here. And so we went, we talked to Coach Bayo, and I forgot the other coach's name that we spoke to at the time. And they were like, yeah, you know, bring AJ. We ended up leaving the second half of the season. Well, we left Armor and came to DC United. You know, I felt like if he was going to do this academy thing, it was best to get him in early. I'm still great friends with all people at Armor, Coach Oscar. At the time, Looking Lamb wasn't there, but, you know, still have a good relationship with Armor. So AJ stayed for like half of U13, all of U14, U17, and it was funky in between there because they had gotten rid of some teams and they didn't have certain age groups. But towards the end of, I want to say, U17, Oscar calls us again, says, hey, we're taking a trip out to Spain. I want AJ to go. I said, okay. Now, technically, I wasn't supposed to do that. So I wasn't supposed to let him go to Spain. But I let him go. and he got scouted out there. Nobody knew. And then he got offered at a club called Huesca to enroll in their academic and soccer program. So, at the time I said, well, you know what? We've done the academy stuff. AJ always said he wanted to play in Europe. I said, okay, well, you know what? Let's try this out. So he basically, from the age of 15 till now, he's been in Spain. He's worked his way up through the different levels in Spain. He's currently playing on their U19 team that's in the second division. But they're at the top of the table. They get ready to go to the playoffs, so they'll probably go to the first division in Spain. And then he also works with a third division club over there called Babastro. So, he's done some trials in Germany. He's been to the Netherlands. So, he's gotten to see different things across the world. So no regrets as far as his path. Now, my younger son, Andrew, hey, whatever big bro does, he wants to do. So he just started getting into soccer. Like basically he wants to do everything AJ does. We started him in Tacoma. He's another one, really fast. He was tearing it up, scoring 10 goals a game. I was like, okay, this isn't challenging. Took him over to Baltimore Armor, actually. And he was with their U11 and U12 group. Did well there. And then he had a knee injury. And the knee injury basically has kept him out for the last year. And a year and like 3 months. So he hasn't played any soccer since then. So he's just started to sort of rehab his knee, go to physical therapy. So now he's on the right path, and we're going to look to try to get him back slowly, try to get him back in probably in the fall. Right now, we're just looking for some training opportunities so that he can continue to strengthen that knee. And those are the boys.
All right. And I guess I'll take up the last slot. I have 3 boys. Like I said, the oldest is RJ, the middle one is Romero, and the baby boy is Ramsey. I'll start with RJ. I mean, I grew up playing soccer in New Jersey in a place called Scotch Plains, which had a pretty strong soccer program. But of course, I didn't have all of the stuff that comes with, like my parents knew nothing about the sport. My mom signed me up for rec. I loved it. I was fast. I was relatively tough because we played a lot of street football and stuff like that. So I will say, hey, I was one of the few black kids to even play. But once I played it, I was bit. And back then, the game was a little rougher than the way they call it now. But to me, compared to playing on the streets with your friends, there was nothing that could happen in a soccer game that actually shook me at all. So went on through that, through high school, and like I said, it was definitely tough at times because of the racial component and stuff that was being said from the sidelines. I mean, I kind of thought that by the time we got to this era, things would change. Not so much, but it is what it is at this point, and we'll keep addressing that and trying to make change. So fast forward to I get married. Went to University of Maryland. I kind of stepped away from soccer. I won't lie. It was like I liked to play, but back then it wasn't really on TV. So it was like you played, but the only people you had to look up to were the older kids. It wasn't on television like that. And so when I got to Maryland and went to University of Maryland, then settled in Maryland, got married, and the kids. We started having kids, and RJ was my first one. And I was like, okay, cool. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to sign him up for Bowie Boys and Girls Club. I'm gonna pop open my chair like in that meme, and I'm gonna sit down and watch him become a star. Well, it didn't work that way because, of course, they want you to coach. They keep saying we don't have any coaches. So my wife says to me, "Well, you know they're asking for coaches." I said, "Hon, I can't coach. You know, I just want to watch." And so she said, "Well, if you don't do it, I'll do it." I was like, "Wait, did you play?" She said, "Nope, I ran track, but they need help. I'll do it." And so of course I did it. You know, went through the whole thing where I wrote out my little lesson plan I'm working with. And the same thing as Mike, I fibbed my way in because RJ was actually 4 at the time and you had to be 5. So got in there, had my little stuff written out, what I was going to do in each part of practice, ended up just tossing that over my shoulder because these little cats was just boys and girls, you know. So did that for a few years, realized that it wasn't really developing. It was like kind of like you test it there to see if your kid likes it. Rolled into help form a club called Quick Feet Soccer. Now, the gentleman that ran that was Justin Reed, and he basically was doing training at the time. And I was like, yeah, let's do a club. I know all the all-stars in Boys and Girls Club. We'll put them on a team. We're gonna roll over everybody. And he said, look, travel soccer is a whole nother beast. And I was like, oh man, nah, these guys are really good. So we put together the squad. I mean, by the time it was put together, we had like up to the ages of like Johnny Gaudette, who's over in Europe right now. He also played at Mount St. Mary's. And then, you know, he took it to Europe. And then we have like Kenny Mesidor, who's at St. Francis. I mean, we had a good group. But I'll never forget, we played a game one time and we ran up against, we were playing up a year because we didn't have enough so we ended up playing actually Philip Jow's squad. Man, they must have beat us like 14-0. And I had never seen, especially little black kids, play like that. I was like, whoa. So we parked it for for the spring season and just trained. And you know, so as time goes on, we got better, ended up going into tournaments. And in the meantime, while all this is happening, Romero and Ramsey are on the sidelines. So myself, another gentleman named Keith Fletcher, Taye Akamboni, we all got like the boys would be on the side. We would grab some pug goals, show them like 2-3 minutes of drills, whatever, maybe 10. And then they would play for like 2 hours at a shot, just pick up, small sided. And over time, you started saying, whoa, these dudes are getting really good. Now they're not getting training, but they're balling. And that's kind of when I fell into knowing that pickup soccer is critical. And like, we didn't call fouls because if it ain't malicious, it's not really a foul. It's just an accident. So you would never see our guys as time went on sitting on the ground with their hands up. Come on, ref. That we don't believe in that, right? So Romero and Ramsey started playing, and eventually we formed teams in that age group. And by the time RJ was topping out at like U10, because we were in CMSSL at that time, you know, they weren't letting any other clubs into NCSL, which was king at the time. So once you hit that point, you had to join either a 2-year age group, which was like OBSL or something, which the level was definitely lower, or you would ultimately have to leave. So the guys, like 4 of the guys got recruited pretty heavily to a squad at Bethesda. And, you know, like I said, the selling point was, okay, we'll go over here. So here it is. You know, it definitely caused some turmoil with Quick Feet. So I ended up having to take all my boys over to Bethesda. First time I ever saw a bill for $6,000. I'm like, what? And so RJ was there because he was recruited. Romero was there because he had the same coach, so the practice times were the same. And then Ramsey was there because we had to find a guy who was practicing the same time because I wasn't going to keep running up and down the road. So it ends up, RJ played like 1 year. And then he was invited to try out at DC United. Now in my mind, I'm like, whoa, it's DC United, pro club, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, let's go. So he went, and he was actually one of the stronger players that came out. Now I will say this, that first year at DC United, I think it was his U12 year, man, it was rough. We were taking licks. You hear me? Taking licks. And I'm like, whoa, it's got to get better than this, you know? And, but over time, you know, it just, you know, you started hearing about these what do you call them? ID centers and all of that. So he starts going to those, and I'm like, okay, he's pretty decent. Rolled up. I mean, the ultimate was, you know, finally we get to the, we worked on with Bayo on the team with AJ. I mean, we had Kevin Paredes and Nyman, and I mean, that team was stacked, you know. Juan, who's still down in Spain. Was it Hayden? Hayden is now playing for Salford City in Europe, well, England. I mean, I don't even want to leave people out. Shoot, we had
Gotta say Jacob.
Jacob Green. Yo, you got one guy who's balling at Wake Forest as, what is he, a cornerback, a safety? Nick Anderson. I mean, yo, it was nuts. The team was nuts. They were outstanding. And so, you know, rolled through that, and then kind of like what Mike talked about, some changes came about. It ended up not being a good fit for RJ. Ended up going to back to Bethesda, and that rolled along, and then kind of rolling into, you know, we're looking for colleges now, and it just well, I'll tell you the rest of the story when we get to the next one. But the bottom line is he ended up finishing with a club called Achilles, where he only played like a tournament and one game, and then COVID just smashed everything to bits. But by then he had already piqued the interest of Marist College, which is where he's at now. And of course, their whole season pretty much ended up canceled, which was very disappointing. But I mean, everyone's going through it with COVID. So, you know, it is what it is, I guess. And we'll keep things cracking. You know, my son Romero, he was not as intense about the game as the other two, but he loved to play. And because he was just around it so much, he's very good. And so he took a different path. Eventually he left Bethesda, and we went to local clubs. I mean, we bounced around, you know, kind of a circuitous, you know, whether it be Maryland United, Next Level, Boo Soccer Academy, and finally landing at a club that, you know, he really enjoys. And I mean, because he enjoys the game, you know, but he's not trying to be a pro. He doesn't even necessarily want to play in college. He already said that. So he's playing with a club called Paragon, which is a new club. Really like the training and the environment. And so that's where he is. Now, finally, there was Ramsey, who, of course, he was the baby in all of this because he's 15 now. Romero 17, RJ just turned 19. So Ramsey went to Bethesda, and because he was, I guess, a December baby, he kind of stayed in his age group, which, you know, now I know was the right thing to do. And so he went through, and his brother, so the whole time his brother's at DC United and he's at Bethesda, which was kind of funny, you know, but I really think that it's almost best to have your kids in different clubs because one thing can connect to the other, you know. So he went there, then he went to he stayed at Bethesda. He played on Philip Jow's team for 2 years, and I mean, the development and the kids that were on that team were incredible as well. You know, it's just like those dudes will be, you know, there's several guys that will be pros and are playing at a very high level, national team pool players, you know, including himself. And, you know, so then from there, it kind of, that's when the DA and it just kind of was like, well, what's next? And he was actually recruited by a few DAs, but of course, you know, you have the situation with the homegrown territories. Stuff had to be sorted out. Ultimately, he was recruited to Columbus Crew. So he went there at 14 years old. He's in the billet program, living with a host family, you know, but they're like family to us because we interact and go up and down the road and things like that. I mean, it's been a little more constricted with COVID. So he's in his second year there. Had a few issues with some injuries, but he's been training pretty much the whole time, but they're taking really good care of him. And so his goal is to be a pro, as is RJ's. Like I said, Merrill said, I just want to play the game, which is fine. And, you know, that's kind of the pathway that my kids have followed and are on right now. Now, I know that took up a little bit of time, guys, but now let's get down to the brass tacks. You know, what are some of the things that you guys feel like you gotta have in soccer? I mean, for me, I remember Mike, you turned us on to futsal, right? Now, I had played futsal with Bethesda, but you decided to take it to another level. You were like, hey guys, let's get it together and get this guy Denison Cabral. He's a futsal wizard, so on and so forth. And I believe we just basically rented out a place, and he worked with the boys.
Calverton School, I think we.
And I wasn't Calverton. It was Indian Creek.
Indian Creek.
So what was your remembrance of that time, Mike?
That question for me?
Yes.
Well, the boys were at the time at DC United, like in the pre-academy. So it was basically I'd offered it to the pre-academy for the U12 and the U13 parents, and it was a combination of kids from both age groups. But I guess before that, I mean, when we were at Waldorf, we played futsal. I mean, futsal was part of the winter program. We did it mostly we didn't do it through Waldorf Soccer Club. We did it with Danny Villagran, which at the time was called Southern Maryland Futsal Club, which is now the professional futsal.
SMFC, yes.
Right, Sporting Maryland. But back then it was Southern Maryland Futsal Club, and that was
Was Tony Galliano in that too? I know he worked with them in some
involved. I think he was with the men's team.
Okay.
Dealt with the youth. It was really Danny and his brother Scotty.
Mm-hmm.
Were the ones that were really proponents. And what they would do is they would draw like the best field players from Waldorf, from up in Bowie, because you'd have kids from like the Free State teams, Waldorf teams. And you might get a couple, maybe one or two from like Calvin or St. Mary's, but mostly Waldorf and Bowie. They have relationships in both areas. So when my kids were like, 7, 8, 9 years old, they were playing futsal in the winter because still in Mid-Atlantic, it's not like, we don't have the advantage of say like Southern California, Texas, Florida, where you can play outdoor year round. And as you know, you got decent weather. Cold in Florida, if it's in the 60s or 70s, they're like, man, it's terrible. For us, that'd be great winter weather to play. We play year round. We could do that, but
we did this year.
Yeah. So the futsal it was like at the time though, when they it was, we play in tournaments and state cup and all that. And it was good. And it was, it was always seen as the winter activity. And I also at the time was peeping out. We'd go up to the Sportsplex up there in Millersville and play against Denison.
Oh, Benfield. Yeah.
Benfield. Well, back then it was called something else, but I think it was called like Miller's. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but we play against Dennis, his team. He had the Denison Cabral Futsal Academy, and they would host tournaments, and they'd be in some of the same tournaments as Waldorf and, well, really SMFC. So, I kind of saw what he was doing. And then you start to learn more about the game, and you really understand that in other countries, especially in South America, this wasn't a winter activity. This is how they develop their kids. This is like, you want to be core fundamental ball control ball player. You want to be able to do some of the, be able to work in tight spaces, have better ball control, better improve your agility with the ball, you know, your movement off the ball. Even a lot of it, you know, as we talked to some of the guys that were actually worked with, you know, Danny and Scotty, like Marcos and those guys who were from Brazil, it's like, it was even more than just, it was learning to move without the ball. He's like, oh, the kids, they don't know how to dance yet, he would say. And so that left an impression upon me that it was, even though we were at an academy, it was important to do these types of activities during the downtime, not just as a winter activity, but to really improve them improve their skill set, to even for the enjoyment of activity, but to improve their skill set to make them better field players. Even. So that was and Dennison at the time, he was the main guy as far as doing it. You know, I mean, Danny and Scotty at that time were doing other things. And I reached out to Dennison Cabral and told him what I was, you know, trying to do, and put a little program together and worked with, you know, and I think I remember talking to you about it most, and you giving me some pointers on how to kind of work the deals behind the scene. And, you know, we put it together and it worked out for them. And the kids enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was good for them to work with him. And I think like maybe a year or so later, he ended up coaching DC's team.
Right. And they went.
When the U.S. Soccer Development Academy finally adopted futsal for his I guess at the time, younger age group.
U13s, I believe.
Right. They did like U12, 13, and 14 or something like that.
Yeah. And
coaching that U14 team, I believe it was.
Yeah.
One year. So it was a good connection to make in relationship, because that's Dennison, that's what his primary, he does, I believe now, coach some outdoor soccer with some local clubs, but his core thing was
he could do some incredible things with a futsal ball, man.
Yes, his core
he's
thing
still
was
on
always
doing
futsal.
Crazy stuff. I mean,
Right.
so Gus, do you remember when we played with Dennison later on at Benfield?
Yeah. Even before I had hooked up with you to do that, you know, AJ was playing futsal with a bunch of kids, and they had went up to what is that, Wildwood, New Jersey?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had gone up to Wildwood, New Jersey, and they were in that tournament, and they got all the way to the finals, and they ended up playing. Oh gosh, you guys will probably. What is the name of that team from New Jersey? They wear like green and white, or
See, I don't know. I don't know.
See the stars?
Was it the Cedar Stars?
Stars.
New Jersey Cedar Stars?
Stars.
Oh,
right.
Yeah. See the stars.
So on that team, right, you had the twins, right? Tavon,
yeah.
right? You had another kid named Nico. I don't know where he plays now. But again, this is being exposed to a different set of kids with different skill sets.
Right.
And we thought we were actually pretty good. And they were out there doing rainbows and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, okay, it's time to get back in the lab.
Time to level up.
Yeah. So fast forward, we you know, that's when you were like, hey, come on over here to Benfield. And I was like, oh, okay. And so we did that, and they had a pretty good squad. That team was also parent led.
Right.
So we didn't have, but those dads did a good job. Their kids were good players. I think a couple of them playing college now.
Yeah.
And so, but I remember talking to Most, and I was like, well, you know, why are we have ballers.
Let's put them together.
Let's just put our own team together. And it was nothing against those guys. Like I said, AJ enjoyed his time.
Well, a lot of those, I mean, it was almost like the guys that were playing together at DC were all buddies and would play together anyway. because if I remember correctly, that was like we had RJ, AJ, Moses, Jacob, because Jacob had came out of Denison's camp as well.
Yeah,
And
they
I
got
mean,
pictures. They have pictures of Jacob up in there.
yeah, when he was like 8 years old. But
Right.
I mean, the fun thing about it was that for me, it was like the Rucker Park when these dudes got together and played. I mean, because I coached them, but really all I did was manage time because they would do things that I hadn't planned. They knew rotations. By the time they got to that point, they were self-coached pretty much. And I mean, that group of boys and the ones, the old threes behind them, I mean, we ended up, I think like RJ and AJ won like 2 state cups with PG Young boys. And then I think RJ won one playing with Danny Villagran and them. Like in that final year, he went with them, and all of the boys played. I mean, Rami, all of our kids played. We tried to drag Kareem out there a few times, and the funny thing is he was good at it, but I don't know whether we playing too late or what it was. He just wasn't really a football.
He's not the futsal. The other two boys, funny you talk about that. I mean,
Yeah. Well, Kyle played with us too.
Kyle played with you guys, right?
We never got KJ out there with us, but
If I might add on, one of the other things, a brief futsal story, because you mentioned Wildwood, Gus, and
Yeah.
so the first time I think Lito and them went to Wildwood with SMFC, and so in between I would watch the games. I'd go watch some of the others. So there was this U14 team, and they wore blue and yellow, and they were actually from Maryland. And I can't remember exactly what they called. They were like some Bethesda something, but they weren't Bethesda Soccer Club, but they were a futsal team. It was like BNC or something like that.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Wait, Mike. I'm gonna let you go on, but BNC is the group that AJ was with, and that's funny that you mentioned that because he was with the younger version of those guys. Go ahead.
Gotcha. So I'm out there and I'm watching, and this kid walks up. He's got slim kid, Ethiopian kid. He's got on a Real Maryland, which is the USL team, sweatsuit on, and everybody is talking. Oh, they're like, hey, yo, and they're giving him that. So I sit there and watch him play. I said, I got to see this. I'm watching him play. Apparently he's 12 and he's playing against 14-year-olds, and he is smooth as butter. I mean, slicing and dicing, going head to head with players. You talk about all the stuff that made me love, part of the reason why I love futsal, why I really love soccer, because futsal has that basketball street element. You talk about playing in the streets most of us have played street basketball. It's that head up in the park, 5-a-side on that space.
Embarrass you.
I'm gonna embarrass you. I'm gonna take you. And the kid he's a 12-year-old, and he's the best player on the court. There's no question. He's the best. The stuff he was doing, I had never seen anybody do.
All right, who was it, man?
Gideon Zalello.
Ah, okay.
Gideon Zalello went to play over at Arsenal, I guess. Was it Arsenal?
Yeah. Arsenal.
Yeah.
Got injured. I guess now he's back at NYCFC. But to see that core element of the game, his game on the court was, I'd never seen it in
level. It was level.
At that point back in and this was like 2010 maybe, I had never seen anything like that.
I think you were talking about Gideon. I think we were talking about Denison on our kind of like I like to describe as like the east side of Maryland in a sense, where Bethesda's west. So you have Devin Payton, who's more the futsal guy on that side.
Yeah, magic moves. Yep.
What did you say, Mos?
Magic moves.
Magic moves, exactly. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was what I figured out finally was like when we first started, like RJ was playing with Bethesda, like the Blue Squad or whatever, they could go and I remember I think they went to the finals against that Capelli squad. Cedar Stars, right?
Yeah.
As time went on, the futsal squads, like there were people who had futsal teams that didn't do anything else. And all of a sudden, it was like just because you were a good soccer player didn't mean you were going to win that. As a matter of fact, you probably weren't, because
Right.
it's not, futsal is not just soccer on a hard court. I mean, the ball control, I mean, certain moves and things that you do don't directly translate. I mean, although a lot of players can do both, it's just, you know, it comes, there's levels, right? And so that's the other point I was going to make. Now, that brings me to another point. When I start hearing like the stuff with, what are your thoughts on how the game should be played? Because me personally, you know, you might say, oh, well, you're from the older generation of soccer, but the bottom line is I didn't start really getting into this thing till about 10 years ago hard, right? And I got to be entertained. So when I see an entertaining squad, for instance, like you say, Gus, that Bayo squad, or like, you know, that '05 Bethesda Blue squad, you know, I would watch them. And even if my kid ain't playing, I would have probably gone to watch them. Conversely, some footy is just not entertaining. You may win, but it's not entertaining. Now, do you think that's a cultural difference? I mean, because I've heard guys say, well, I don't want to see any flicks and, you know, play the way you're facing and, you know, just basic ball. And you can win games. But I mean, how do you deal with, because I know what your kids like to do. And I'll probably put some clips on just so people can see from you know, off of YouTube or whatever. But how do you deal with that when you're talking to your kids and you know, okay, well, to get on the field, you got to play real basic. But that's not going to show you in your best light because you're basically detuning. You know, so what would you, how do you deal with that? All right, Kelvin, go.
I think the kids know, especially all of our kids who play at a certain level. I think they know time and place of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not gonna start juggling the ball in front of your goalie. I mean, you know, you're not doing that. But I think in the final third is between the final third, half midfield, final third is where you're probably gonna try to be a little bit more creative. And I think being expressive at that point is okay. I don't think there's a problem with that. And I think the coaches should encourage that too, because I think you want, kind of like Mike was saying, you want to be comfortable on the ball where you're not afraid of losing it. And the coach shouldn't be afraid of you losing it because he knows you're good on the ball, you're strong on the ball. You're not gonna do something outlandish to cost your team at the same time, but you're also gonna try to, you know, like you said, it's entertainment. So you're trying to have fun and you want to, you know, show your skill too at the same time. So I don't think there's anything, but to your point, there is a generational gap. There's no doubt about that. There is an age cutoff or old school mentality, new school mentality. There's definitely that.
All right. What about you, Gus?
I would say my outlook on the game as a whole changed as I was fortunate enough to travel different places in Europe because of AJ. It's only because of him when he was younger, and even older. But, you know, it started off, I remember we went to Scotland and he played against the Celtic, Aberdeen, Partick Thistle. There were a few clubs. And I remember an 11, I think he was 10, playing for the Celtic. And they said, oh, you know, he just came over from the Rangers. And they were talking about how, you know, basically he was getting paid, right? Or his parents were getting paid. And I was watching this kid play and I'm like, man, he's so free and just carefree. And I'm watching how the coaches are interacting. And they're not telling him stop dribbling. The parents aren't saying that.
Mm-hmm.
He's free. You could see it on his body language, his face. I think here, and it's not all clubs, but I think here, even as young as U8, U9, it's too much about the win. They're taking the creativity out of the kids. I think as great of youth national team and national team players that we have now, when you watch our games, name me 3 people who are creative in the final third or are beating people 1v1s with ease.
Mhm.
And it's not because these players aren't good, because a lot of them are playing at the highest level, they're pros. But I really believe that they just weren't in environments that nurtured that allowed them to be creative, allowed them to fail, allowed them to lose the ball without fear of being taken out of a game. We've seen that plenty of times on the side.
Yeah.
And so, I really think that, like Kelvin said, there's a time and place. There's also time and space, right? You don't want to do Maradonas and stuff in your own defensive half and lose the ball.
Right.
But when you do get a chance to go other places and see how they play, in some youth leagues in Europe, they don't even have refs and stuff at the young age. There's no keeping of score. There's none of that. It's just go play, go learn, be creative. Friends and family are excited, and when the kid does a rainbow or a flick or certain things like that. So I think really that's it. There has to be that time to just enjoy and love and come comfortable with the ball. And then as you start going through the different levels, you're able to use those, back to what Kelvin said, in the right time at the right, place.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I've definitely, tried to do with, with the parents that are involved in PG Young Boys with our organization is try to tell them to relax, especially when the kids are just playing. Like you standing there, you watching your kid, and I get it, you enjoy watching them, but think about the fact of if you were in a time and age where your kids could just go play, they wouldn't have you there talking about, hey, get a better first touch. I mean, because for one thing, I mean, my first time seeing something like that was I did personal training for a long time. Before I had kids, I worked with a lot of AAU basketball and high school basketball players and then pros too. But I remember going to a gym and it was a high pressure situation. It was like a playoff or something like that. Kid's on the line, he's bouncing the ball and he got a, free throw. He shoots the ball hits the back of the rim, pops out. And somebody from, I'm pretty sure his family, from the way they were reacting earlier, says, gotta make those free throws. And I'm like, you do understand, the man didn't set out to miss the free throw. The same way if you yell for a kid to connect passes. And I gotta be honest with you, the first time that we saw, like the first place I ever saw it was at DC United, where the coach just sat there with a little pad, a little tablet, which is not uncommon now. And me and my wife are looking at each other like, he's not gonna say anything? And then it was explained, this is the test. We did all the work in practice. All he's doing is taking notes on what they're gonna work on to get better. Because the one thing I do know is you cannot process the game of footy when someone's telling you what to do. You can't joystick your players, and I think that even as far as some of our coaches, like you said, there's the newer generation. There's a lot of I guess expanded education on this, and obviously you pick the way you want to do it. But the truth of the matter is the parents are going to pick who's going to interact with their players, because we're the only ones that, whether they turn pro or not, we love them and we're going to make sure that they have success in life, And so to me, that's something that parents got to understand, man, when they're young, man, have fun with it. Because I think all of y'all know, as they get older, some of the fun gets sucked out of it.
Well, it's a business,
Yeah.
right? Um,
And you get paid at the front end in business in US soccer. Whereas overseas, the payoff comes with the however many you can get all the way to the finish line.
It's true.
So, I mean, like I said, what are you guys' thoughts on? I mean, obviously everybody's from on a different path, but like the situation, Gus, you would know the situation with trying to get a player to Europe to play, with good potential. What are some of the roadblocks to that?
well, first and foremost is the passport, right? So I don't care how good of a player you are. If you don't have that European passport, well, let's say this, you're not getting there before the age of 18. Okay. To play at a high level. Now, in AJ's case, I was able to get him over to Europe because he's on a student visa.
Mm-hmm.
And while he was training and playing in lower leagues, that was allowed for the type of visa that he had.
Now, did they keep him in those leagues because he had to work his way up, or was there some sort of FIFA regulations about where he could play?
Oh, definitely FIFA regulations, because again, he couldn't play in, the leagues with the Barças and people like that, until he turned 18. So when he turned 18, now he's in, I guess if you want to call it an official FIFA sanctioned league where there's promotion and relegation between the second division and first division at that age group.
Right.
So you'll have some teams that's in the second division now that were up in the first division who played Real Madrid and Barca and those types of things. And then some of those clubs also have B teams. So they may have, a juvenile A, they call it, that plays at the highest level. And then they may have another like B squad that plays at a lower level because they have, so many kids, things like that. I would definitely say being on the national team is a plus. There's an advantage. There's actually things that, behind the scenes go into, depending on how many official caps you have and things like that makes it easier for clubs to get you work permits and things like that.
Right.
So if you're not a fixture on the national team, which AJ wasn't, if you're not a European passport holder, then you just have to grind. And your hopes are somebody is willing to take a chance on you when you turn that age of 18. Because there's a lot more kids in Europe than people think. They might be playing in the third division or fourth division, but nobody talks about those kids. They only want to know about first team players. You might find, you might see something on a kid that played, let's say if you played for like a Brian Cleveland, or you played for somebody high level where people follow their players,
Right.
then you might find a player out there that's playing like third division in Spain. But that kid at some point also was on the youth national team, right? So at the end of the day, though, I really feel like you just have to be confident in yourself and your abilities.
Right.
You can't get caught up in social media and all these different things. And I'm talking to the players at this point, because I still talk to a lot of the players whether they're in Europe. I mean, friends of AJ that AJ's grew up with, like, those are my boys, right? So, like, I have relationships with some of these kids, and I still talk to them, whether or not they're pros and on the highest stage, or, you know, they're grinding it out in Denmark or places like that. And I'm just like, keep going. Just
Right.
keep going. You don't know when your chance will come. And when it does, and, you know, I'll say this too, not every pro player, and I don't care what country they're from, plays for their national team.
Well, it seems to me, and I've said this before, and now you've kind of filled in the gaps, but it's like, okay, you want to be a pro, but this is the only place where people think the way to become a pro is to make it to the national team. Everywhere else, it's like, if you're a really good pro, the national team will come. And that's like the gravy. Here, it's the goal. It's like, I got to get to national team. And then it's kind of like, to me, it just seems kind of, well, put it this way. When you look at the first team national team players relative to the guys that were U15, 17s, and I don't take anything away. I always give props and accolades to anyone who makes it to any of these levels. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at 5 years ago, who was on the U17 national team, and then you look at who's playing ball now, you might find that, you know, like when we spoke to, you know, Eddie Pope or some of these guys, a lot of these guys were denied. You know, Weston McKinney, I know you know more, that their opportunity didn't come when a lot of people thought it should come. But they kept grinding, and ultimately, where did they end up? You know, on the first team. So that's the other thing that, you know, kind of.
And you have a lot of the young guys in college too, right? So again, there's no one path. You know, I'll just take a player, and I don't remember him as a youth player, but I'll take somebody like Daryl DK that everybody's talking about now.
Right.
Right. He, I don't know. Did he play for like an MLS academy before he went to, he was at Virginia, wasn't he?
Yeah, I don't believe so, because I don't know where the homegrown situation came out for him, but I don't believe he was. We'll have to check into that.
Right. But, you know, again, perfect example, wherever he might have played in his youth years, went to college, then got picked up by, I believe, Orlando, gets loaned out to, where is it, Barnsley he's at now in the Champions League.
Yep.
And he's tearing it up there.
Yep.
Then he comes to the national team. So I don't know
Right.
if he was on the national team before that.
Nah, I don't.
You see that too. We know a couple of kids on the youth level who went overseas who weren't on the national radar. They go overseas. U.S. hears that they're overseas, so automatically they put them into the pool.
Yeah, they got to bring them in because they want to make sure they didn't miss something.
They want to make sure they didn't miss something.
That's happened to quite a few players as well. It's like, oh,
right.
you weren't sniffing them before they went overseas. Now you're scared you're gonna miss something.
Right.
But you know, I guess that's the nature and the size of the country. Guys, we got to give a shout out. We got to give a shout out to those guys over there at Future Soccer Club, Future Monarchs 03.
Future Monarchs, salute.
I applaud you. You know, I don't know all the coaches' names. I've known Mark Landon for forever, and Future Soccer Club has been grinding. You know, it's a Black-owned club, and those boys played some pretty ball in the Dallas Cup that they won, the national title. Absolutely. I mean, everyone has been very complimentary to the style that they played in.
Yeah.
So I got to give them props. And the funny thing is also, I mean, Baltimore Armor won it in the 04s. Prior to that, OBGC, which you were talking about, Gus, 2012, And I mean, they had like Jeremy Abobasi and those guys on there. That's a big old gap. And I do believe that if we were to break down the amount of talent that comes out of this area and stack them on one squad, we could play anybody in the US for sure. Am I saying too much?
No,
I mean, am I?
That's accurate.
You know,
That's accurate. You could find players from this area all over the map.
matter of fact, I just saw where you know the kid Flanagan, the kid.
Oh, Avion Flanagan.
Yes,
Yeah.
he just signed with Cincy.
Yep.
You know, and I'm gonna have to say Ohio loves them some DMV players apparently.
They do.
They got Joe Jow as the captain. You know what I'm saying? And but you know, it's just I'm just proud of these guys and to watch them play. Another message I would like to send: DC United, please play those kids. Those are our guys. And I really don't care what your record is. If you're playing them, I'm paying to come in your stadium. And I think there's quite a few of us in this area that will do that.
Well, they have the new leadership, right? So they maybe got a chance.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll come back to this recording. Hey, that was part one. We got a little long-winded, so we released this one. Part two is coming soon. Hope you tune in and enjoy.